The consequences of environmental degradation have impacted people across the world for hundreds of years. In recent decades, the negative social, economic, and health impacts of global problems, particularly climate breakdown, have fallen disproportionately on those least responsible. This episode explores how environmental destruction has impacted people's past and present, particularly those voices who are often marginalized within and across countries. To do so, I'm joined by Nimo Bassi, who is director of the ecological think tank, the Health of Mother Earth Foundation. Among other positions, he is a member of the steering committee of Oil Watch International and was formerly chair of Friends of the Earth International. In 2010, he was awarded the Right Livelihood Award, and in 2012, the Rafto Prize. Nimo, welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's very good to have you here. And I'm going to launch in with the first question. In what way have communities, particularly in the global south, experienced the growing consequences of climate breakdown and other global environmental problems?
The climate breakdown and other global environmental problems have meant very direct challenges to communities in the global south because the area have generally been a sacrifice zone through many years. The plundering of the global south has gone on through slavery, through colonialism, and right now, ongoing imperialism, the imperial powers that don't accept that they are imperial. In terms of global warming, the impacts have been very clear in terms of desertification. If you talk about Africa, the Sahel region is very seriously impacted, and we're having coastal erosions. You know, Africa, I talk about Africa a lot. Africa is totally surrounded by water. So rising sea levels have direct implications for communities. But even before that becomes a major issue, there's a lot of coastal erosion right around the continent. And in some places like the Niger Delta, where I come from, we're also experiencing natural soil subsidence. So the global warming, sea level rise compound this. Then we're having gross pollution from fossil fuel extraction, whether coal or oil or gas. And early 2019, we had two severe cyclones in southeastern Africa, the Cyclone Idai and Cyclone Kenneth. That kind of cyclone never happened in recent history in that region. And we learned that increasing Indian Ocean temperatures triggering this kind of cyclone. So we're seeing the cyclone, we're seeing the global warming impacts very directly on the lives of the people in many dimensions, impacting agricultural production and, of course, livelihoods and access to resources.
And in what way does that lived experience feed in to justice movements in the global south, both in the past? So you talked about a number of issues there when it came to the impacts of particularly Western nations on the global south. So when it comes to those movements in the past, how much did this lived experience in environmental degradation feed into their narrative and campaigning? And how is that, if in any way, changing now as those impacts increase?
Yes. Well, the impacts, as you rightly suggested, has been over a long stretch of time. But now the impacts are getting more stark, more clear, more challenging. In fact, the struggle now is about survival because the lives of people are directly threatened. Environmental justice campaign in the global south is a life or death struggle because most people directly depend on environmental resources. So the fight for justice is a natural struggle to ensure that the very basis of life, the fabric of life, the webs of life, natural webs of life are supported and maintained. But we find that the degradation over the years has been so in some places totally unimaginable. I could speak directly about the kind of environmental degradation caused by oil companies and oil extraction in the Niger Delta, in Nigeria, talk about what oil companies have done in the Amazonia area of Ecuador, talk about coal extraction in South Africa, which has left burning caves, abandoned coal mines that are on fire for decades. We have gas flaring in Niger Delta that have been going on from the 1950s, and they go on day and night, 24 hours every day for this length of time. In the past 2 years, there's been, on the average, 5 oil spills every day in the Niger Delta. And so the build up environmental degradation, mostly tied to extraction of resources that are compounding global warming, has been so threatening that people have, over the years, they mobilized and organized, and there are more and more communities standing up to resist what is threatening their lives, because people are seeing what's going on as not just an occasional environmental change or occasional pollution or contamination. What people are seeing are things that may not be reversible in this lifetime, things that will take many lifetimes to return to normal if the situation is not further compounded. So the struggle is very holistic. It takes all dimensions: environmental, social, economic, political. So you find communities and faith-based organizations, the media, coming together in the struggle for a complete overhaul of the system. So I would say that at the stage we are now, we've got to a point where if solidarity is not built at a higher level, the challenges that we are that's confronting communities and territories and regions will not be surmounted. So this has forced grassroots to link more regionally and attempt also to link globally.
Right, and that was going to be my next question. If we look over the coming years and decades, a time in which we expect these environmental shocks to increase, particularly driven by things like climate breakdown, how do you think those movements will respond to that? You're saying that they're already making those connections across regions, across the world, and presumably you've also got the impact of a younger generation coming up as well. As we look into a world in which at the moment it looks like it's going to be more environmentally destabilized, how do you expect those movements to evolve and develop?
I'm thinking that the direction of things would have to actually go very fundamental. There are many things we take for granted. For example, when we look at economic models, people generally believe that market forces are invisible, that it's a question of demand and supply. So even in terms of countering the continuous dependence on fossil fuels, the approach is always mostly in that dimension. We need to go back to look at what constitutes economy, what constitutes energy, what has made us think this way, what is the factor behind the imaginary that is driving the way we behave. And I think the movements would have to engage in struggles for mindset reset, so that we go back to who we truly are and come back not just as individuals, but as a collective in all our various locations. So I'm seeing a situation where when movements challenge the imaginaries, they would also look at why are we hearing that technology has solution to everything, to food production, to climate solution, and how come we don't realize that what is creating more of the problem is the entrenchment of false solutions? So I see a situation where movements will go back to traditional wisdom, to indigenous knowledge, and build a future based on knowledge that is not driven by financial or economic benefits and kind of domination. So things like climate engineering or geoengineering would be seen to clearly, potentially aim at deflecting climate impacts on the global south. Genetic engineering will eventually destroy our biodiversity on which most people depend for survival, and therefore it will only be those who are equipped to survive, maybe to go to Mars or to live in outer space, who can create this kind of artificial environments on Earth and also possibly do well on it. So really, I think the race for the remaining natural resources will make the situation more complex and more violent, possibly. And I see the global movements actually taking aim at stopping war. We have to stop the investment in armaments, because right now we talk about Green Climate Fund to help countries, vulnerable countries, to be raised to a level of about $100 billion in a year. already we're seeing climate impacts in some countries that go beyond that in 1 year. And we're seeing the richer countries investing up to 2 trillion, almost $2 trillion US in military warfare and equipment every year. We are seeing imperialism in the forms of military bases across the world, and countries who are more or less running the world, exerting extreme influence on where decisions are being made, destroying multilateralism. I believe this would make the movement for in the future more connected, more intense, and the risk even higher. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's going to be ultimately negative. I think people power will bring about system change that is needed.
And that's a great note to end on. Nemo, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.